For our next presentation, or our next award, I'd like to invite the Honorable Margaret Marshall, the 24th Chief Justice of the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court, but my favorite part, made and born in South Africa.
Good evening. So let me give you two bookends, Lessons from an Improbable Life. The subtitle of Governor Deval Patrick's thoughtful, reflective autobiography. And the second, other end of the book, at least psychically, we were cheering for advancing freedom and justice around the world. My childhood was spent in an isolated village in rural South Africa during the apartheid years, denied access to what New York has to offer, theater, television, or the riches of radio. It was the apartheid years, and everything was apartheid propaganda. Books have been the source of my own inspiration, of joy, solace, and comfort from my earliest memories. That is about all of childhood that Governor Patrick and I share. He was born to and raised by a single mother on the south side of Chicago, a neighborhood where some said everything was broken. Broken sidewalks, broken playgrounds. I, the child and beneficiary of privileged white parents, and he, a different childhood. One thing we do share is a deep love of learning. Deval's mother, quote, a firm believer in the power of education. My mother, a firm believer that books would take me beyond the confines of a rigid, racist, mean society. And perhaps it should not have surprised me that as I tried to think of how to introduce a great, wise, and generous man to you this evening, one of my childhood books came to mind, and here I will display my age. In the middle of the night, Miss Clavel turned on the light and said, "Something is not right." Something is Not Right, the book that was written in 1939. Then someone, Miss Clavel, turned on the light. For close to 40 years, you're that old, Governor. For close to 40 years, Deval Patrick has turned on the light. As student, as lawyer, as counselor, and as a great public servant. He has spoken about what his light saw with an eloquence that I have seldom heard matched, and I have heard some great speakers in my day. Something is not right. Deval Patrick has taught thousands of his students, of his clients, his constituents, the public, and he has taught me to think anew with renewed energy, and to talk openly about important questions, to understand that those questions are not political questions or tactical questions to be decided in the heat of a campaign. They are deeply moral questions. Something is not right. And with his talent, his vision, and his understanding, Governor Patrick became our nation's leader in student achievement, early childhood education, in health coverage for all, in improved services for veterans, those men and women who fight our battles on foreign soil, in providing more people with jobs and more economic opportunities. Social and economic justice are put to the test of the rule of law. We all know, each of us here tonight knows, that something is not right. And in the middle of the night, Deval Patrick turns on the light. As long as we do our job, bear our generational responsibility, Deval has written, young people everywhere will carry with them the very ideals that have shaped the best of this country. And then someday, he said, they will lift up their own communities, make their own history, and give the next generations of Americans a reason to believe. A reason to believe. Wise counselor, intrepid public servant, cheerleader for advancing justice around the world, a righteous man who awakens in the middle of the night and turns on the light. Ladies and gentlemen, it is with great joy that I present to you our very own Miss Clavel, Governor Deval Patrick.
My first visit to South Africa was actually in an official capacity. I was still in the Clinton administration. I was head of the Civil Rights Division. And I was invited and given the great honor to be a part of the convening around certain provisions of the new Constitution and then some legislation called the Employment Equity Act. I know about the history of the LRC because it was one of the things that we talked about at the Legal Defense Fund in New York. It's the sort of organization that puts to the test whether the society that is committed or says it's committed to the rule of law really is. It's one thing to have our laws or our constitutions here and around the world express the hope and struggle of mankind and womankind for freedom and justice. It's an entirely other thing to go into court and give those expressions life. That's what the LRC was about. And that's what we were trying to do at LDF. Sister and brother organizations around the world in that struggle were ones that, at least psychically, we were cheering for.
Justice Award. Ladies and gentlemen, Governor Deval Patrick.
Thank you. Madam Chief Justice, thank you so much for the very warm welcome and incredible remarks. I hope to become the man you described. I want to thank the Legal Resources Center of South Africa for this extraordinary recognition, and particularly in the company of the other honorees tonight, very, very meaningful for me. I remember when Jack Greenberg introduced me to Arthur Schauskelson and made me feel like I was connected in that relay race for justice that we talk about at the Legal Defense Fund, enormously important to me. And as I think about the work of the LRC, and I think about all of your support and my gratitude for it, not in some abstract way, but in a very personal way, I am reminded that in our times, and maybe in all times, democracy, it turns out to be a very fragile thing. It turns out it relies on all kinds of unspoken rules. Rules around decorum and duty and restraint and respect. And as I tried to express in the video, so much of what we count on as the foundational principles of democracy turn entirely on the willingness of someone, somewhere, to stand up in court and give those principles life. And that is what the LRC has been about. I remember near the end of my time in service, there was an extraordinary experience where we had all kinds of children fleeing violence across our southern borders, and the border authorities were overwhelmed. And the Obama administration asked a number of sitting governors if we would shelter some of these refugee children for a period of time, and we looked around and considered facilities that were appropriate for young children, mind you, some of them 3 and 4 years old, and agreed to provide these facilities should the federal government need them. And, you know, I'd get that immigration is a hot topic here. And for that gesture, I was called everything but a child of God. And I remember being the morning after announcing that we would accept some of these young people, getting my honey-do list from my wife, who sent me to Home Depot. And it was a beautiful spring morning, and I was up early, and it was an unusual morning without any appointments, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to do this on my own. I hopped in the truck in my disguise, my t-shirt, my jeans, my baseball cap and sunglasses, and shot out of the driveway on the way to the Home Depot. And I got there and I was outed by the manager in the very first aisle I went into. "Good morning, Governor," he said. "Welcome to the Home Depot. How can I help you?" I had an encounter in the checkout lane, a loud and angry encounter, and it's exactly the reason why my security detail didn't like me to do what I had done. And he wasn't threatening, he was just really angry and really loud. And he said, "Governor," he said, "I totally disagree with what you did." He said, "My own wife came here as an immigrant, and she came here legally, and that's the way it ought to be, and I think you should know I'm wrong. You're wrong." And I said, "Thank you for your feedback." And I thought, let me get out of here as fast as I can. Turns out I had 6 other encounters in the Home Depot that morning on the same subject. And in every one of those cases, the people whispered, "Governor, you're doing the right thing. Governor, thanks for standing by those kids." The calls to the office were 3 and 4 to 1 in favor of sheltering those children. And I thought to myself, what is wrong with this picture? We have learned to shout our anger and whisper our kindness, and it's completely upside down. And while I acknowledge and honor the professionalism, the legal acumen and rigor of the LRC, the spirit of kindness behind it must be acknowledged too. And in that spirit, I thank you.